Yeah, I'm normally down here at this end.
I was just gonna say, I could just as easily be on that end. I'll be cautious.
Okay. We're kind of rowdy in person here.
Let's go, we're ready to go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukee Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff report are available on the city website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do. It contains an important information about our process tonight. First, we talk about informational items. Are there any informational items from staff?
I do not have any informational items this evening.
All right. And then audience participation. This is an opportunity to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Before I go further, are there any audience members this evening?
There are none here in City Hall. Brett, do you want to look at the attendees? See if there's anybody there.
We have several people in as attendees. A couple of the names I recognize as ones for the applicant team for the hearing item tonight. I don't recognize all of them, so I'm not sure. If you're an attendee and you have an item to bring up that isn't on the agenda, should you raise your hand?
Sure, I'll go through the script then just to double check. Does anyone wish to comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? If so, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom. If you're on the phone, please use *9 to indicate that you would like to make a comment. Now would be that opportunity, and we'll just give a few seconds here. Anyone, Brett?
Not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, I think we'll move on then. At this point in the agenda, the Planning Commission will act as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee, the CIAC. I now ask staff to provide any updates.
The only update I have is just a reiteration that we're holding our land use 101 training on March 31st. Via Zoom from 6 to 7. It's on the city's calendar. We invite everyone to attend who wants to just learn a little bit about land use planning, from everything to what you can do in your backyard to how we plan as the state. It should be about an hour, and we'll be there to answer any questions you might have. And if you just look on the city's calendar, there will be a link to a Zoom invitation there.
Okay, thank you. And do any CIAC members have any items to report? Last question then, does anyone in the audience wish to speak with the Planning Commission in their role as the CIAC? If so, please use the raise your hand feature. And again, *9 if you're on the phone. I'll just give you a couple seconds if you'd like to. None, Brett?
No.
Okay, great. We'll move on then. Work session items. The work session item is a discussion regarding the Housing Capacity Technical Committee. Planning Manager Laura Weigel will present information about the committee for our discussion. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. Brett, you want to pull it up?
Sure.
And get Brett to pull up a little presentation for us. All right, so the Housing Capacity Technical Committee, I wanted to talk to you all about that tonight. I'm hopefully looking for a volunteer to serve on this committee, so I wanted to brief you all about what it actually is to see if somebody would be interested from the Planning Commission. So basically, what we're required to do as this jurisdiction is to create a housing capacity analysis every 6 years. It used to be, it's called a housing needs analysis. You may have been here when they were done in the past. And so now we're getting ready to update it. We'll call it the housing capacity analysis. We have a requirement by the state to do it. So what we do is we look at an assessment. We do an assessment of current and future demand for housing across a different range of prices, rent levels, location, and housing types and densities. Okay, so we look at what's basically currently under demand and what might be demand in the future based on these categories, people that might want to be in the city of Milwaukee. And then what we do is we take that identified need and we compare it to the 20-year supply of residential land that's available to be built on, right? So we do a buildable lands analysis as part of this, all of this work, and we look at where there could be infill and do we actually have the capacity to accommodate the identified need, right? And if we don't have that capacity, then we have to develop policies and actions that will actually help us get to being able to provide that need. And the good thing is that the city of Milwaukee is in a good position because we have already the Milwaukee affordable housing strategy. And so it kind of gets at some of the things that have been identified through the state process that we need to do as part of our planning process to identify specific goals and actions and a timeline for implementing the things that we've identified that we need to try to get the housing for. So we have to develop a housing production strategy that gets reviewed by the state so that holds us accountable to actually trying to find ways to get housing built. Previously, the state didn't require a housing production strategy. That's completely brand new. It came out of House Bill 2003. So it's really this accountability measure that are wanting jurisdictions to actually have to find ways to incentivize or get this housing built. So, and then we submit that plan, the housing production strategy, to the state for their review, and they kind of say, yeah, we think you're on the right track, or you're not on the right track, and we can make adjustments. So we hire a consultant to do it because it's pretty technical work, right? It's really, buildable lands is a technical exercise. Looking at all the census data, all those things is really technical. But what we do is that we need folks we're establishing this committee so that we can kind of meet with them with this technical analysis and go through, are they getting it right? Are there things that data analysis isn't capturing? How can we identify things here in the city of Milwaukee that don't necessarily come through a data-driven analysis? And so that's kind of the role of this committee that we're talking about having. So kind of walking through the whole process and just kind of giving feedback, that on the ground knowledge of the city of Milwaukee. And so we've hired Eco Northwest as the consultant, which is great because they were hired by the state to actually help develop the housing production strategy language that was adopted that we have to follow. And then they've also worked on the regional housing needs analysis project, which is something else that we're looking at regionally. We're not looking at it right now, but regionally it's being looked at because regionally we've undercalculated our housing needs every single time, which is part of the reason we're in a bit of a housing crisis. So they're trying to come up with ways to think about how we're actually doing housing capacity analysis. So we're doing ours because we're required by the state to do it. So we're a little ahead of the game of what might change in the future. But the good thing is that the folks that are working on that kind of regional look at how we analyze housing capacity, they are actually work for ECO. And so they'll know what's coming so that we can kind of talk through those things with that group. So I think I'm really excited about having them on board. And so here's the outline of the technical committee. I took this to council last week, I guess it was, and they approved us moving forward with this structure of the technical committee. And the city councilor, Falconer, is going to serve as the liaison from council. And then I've been reaching out to all of these other groups of folks, including 3 people from the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee or the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee. So I've already got an email out to all of those folks. And so tonight, the idea was to hopefully, and maybe you don't have to figure it out tonight. Maybe you guys think about it a little bit and you come up with an answer. Or if somebody just is so excited about this work and wants to volunteer tonight to sit on the technical committee, that'd be fantastic. So just to give you a little bit idea of the workload. So basically the work is going to kick off with this technical committee probably at the end of April or the beginning of May. We'll have like 9 meetings over a 12-month period. And then there's going to be the draft housing capacity analysis we're going to hopefully get it done in October, and then have the housing production strategy by March. And then the project will be completed by June of 2023. So it's about 9 meetings. We don't know what time of day it's going to be because it'll depend kind of on the makeup and what makes most sense for folks. And we're imagining that it'll probably be a mix between virtual and in-person, just depending on people's needs. And people are in different places because we have DLCD reps and Metro reps and that kind of thing. So it'll probably be some sort of hybrid if we can do that. We can pull it off technically. So I guess I will pause now and just say, do you all have any questions about this? Or if anybody just says, yeah, woo, sign me up.
I'm interested.
Laura, this is Chair Loswell. I have a question for you. Are you also comparing notes and sharing resources and information across cities or municipalities that are taking on the same task? Or you mentioned the regional approach. I was just curious, like, how much learning are we doing from similar jurisdictions?
Well, the housing capacity piece has been going on for a long time. So there's kind of this formula of how it gets done now. So we have an idea of kind of how to gather the data. And then we will have people like from the Oregon, the Catholic Charities representative, somebody from DLCD, somebody from Metro. So the idea is that we will have some folks that work with other jurisdictions that are also doing this work that will be on our committee. So while we won't have representatives from other jurisdictions, I think that we'll have some representatives that know what's going on both regionally and at the state. So that will be helpful because right now it is an exercise that is specific to Milwaukee. That is the nature of the exercise, even though there is this whole other thing that's going on with the regional housing analysis, but no real concrete process has been established for that. So we don't know exactly how that's ultimately going to be calculated because the state hasn't adopted it. It's still kind of in this exploratory phase, trying to figure out how it might work. So, but we'll stay up to date on that as we're going through the process because we'll have folks from other agencies at the table with us.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
So this is really interesting. So at the end of this project, it looks like we developed some sort of needs analysis, gap analysis, whatever you want to call it. And I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but what happens with that? I mean, what kind of actions follow on from that sort of analysis? And I know that this is kind of getting out there, but I mean, just conceptually, what would you see after the report is completed?
Right. So I think that there's been some different tools that are in the toolkit for consideration. One of the things that we already do here, luckily, is that we have the construction excise tax here, so we can actually use that to put that towards some sort of units with some sort of affordability component. We also have the urban renewal area. So we have some tools already in our toolbox. I'm not super familiar with them off the top of my head because that's not the space that I live in, but we do have some of the tools, and I think that there's a whole toolbox. And what I can do is I can send everybody a link to that document just so you'll kind of get an idea of the different things that are being discussed. That wasn't a great answer. I apologize for that.
And my question was a little bit fuzzy. I was just trying to figure out, I guess, from my perspective, I would say that this report sort of informs how you employ those tools down the road.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Vice
You
Chair.
have one hand raised by, Vice Chair Edge. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Laura. This probably goes without saying, but I would like to signal my interest in representing the Planning Commission on this technical committee. I feel, personally, I feel that I'm well suited for the nature of the work in terms of my professional background and also my experience, volunteering in this space. And then also it offers, some, growth as well. It's the opportunity to learn about, some, really the data behind some of these strategies, and how we can actually, go about solving this problem, not just in Milwaukee, but, elsewhere in the region. And so I'd be very excited to participate in this and be able to, get deeply involved in the technical aspects of, this project and this process. So I know that I'm probably not the only one that's interested, but I did, just want to go ahead and signal that I would be a very enthusiastic participant in this if everyone else is comfortable with that.
Do you mind if we go to the gallery view so that we can see everybody's faces?
I just want to make, I think Commissioner or Vice Chair Edge, Co-Chair Edge makes a good point. He was on the CPAC or the CPIC before, makes that connection with that group. He is highly qualified. And we know that he's really into this just from, past experience. So I would also like to suggest that a former planning commissioner chair be asked to join, and that is Kim Travis. She works for the state in these kind of capacities. And she was part of the CPIC, I think kind of at the beginning of it, if I remember that right. CPAC, yeah. And so she's also familiar with that process and would be a good expert if she is available.
Yeah, that's great. And I believe she was on the email, but I could reach back out to her and see if she might be interested in it. And then I would run it back to the council just to be sure that they were okay. That sounds like a great idea because she's super familiar with the city. That's a good idea.
Are there other commissioners who have an interest? I would just say, Vice Chair, I'd be interested in being your backup. So if for some reason you weren't able to make it, I would have an interest in just chipping in and helping out where I can. But
I appreciate that. I feel like that worked out really well when we teamed up on the CPIC. So yeah. I'd be happy to continue with that if everyone else is comfortable with that too.
I realize how interchangeable CPAC and CPIC were. Yes. All right. Laura, I think if that makes sense to you and it works out just fine. Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you. I will put your names in on the roster and I will look into the suggestion from Commissioner Hemer.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe just quickly before we move on, wanted to say thanks to staff. I really appreciated seeing the IAP2 kind of spectrum of engagement here and just being really clear on that consult role. And I know this was a conversation we had at the CIAC a while back. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say thanks because I think this might help this entire committee.
Thank you very much. I wanted to be really specific about that because I know it was a little bit of a challenge with the CPIC. So we tried to kind of set that out at the beginning so that everybody understood what their role in the group would be. So thank you.
I'm sorry. I think your mic is live so that when you hit the button, you might mute it.
Gotcha.
We did hear you loud and clear, however.
Off of Greg's hot mic.
Okay. Full chairs here. Sorry about that.
If it makes sense, we'll move on with the agenda. Oh, and closed it. Just 1 second. There we go. All righty. So now we'll move on to our hearing item for the evening, which is the Milwaukee High School Reader Board sign at 2301 Southeast Willard Street. The public hearing on Milwaukee High School Reader Board sign is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider application number CSU-2021-005. The purpose of the application is to request approval for the community service use application for the replacement of a monument sign at 2301 Southeast Willard Street. The applicant has the burden of proving the application is consistent with the City of Milwaukee's zoning, subdivision ordinance, comprehensive plan, and any applicable municipal code provisions, and that the proposal conforms with all city applicable criteria. I now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where the criteria can be found.
I think the applicable criteria are in section 14.08.090 for community service use and conditional use signs, 14.16.010, which I believe is the standards for the residential sign district, and 14.24, which refers to sign illumination.
Thank you, Brett. All testimony and evidence must be direct toward the applicable substantive criteria. Failure to address a criterion or raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue precludes appeal to the City Council based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow a response precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party withstanding may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission to the City Council. Persons withstanding are those who submit written comments or testify in person or via Zoom. If you are here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and relevant criteria, and to avoid repetition or non-relevant information. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extension shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless the continuance or extension is requested or agreed to by the applicant. We'll go through some conflicts of interest. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? And because I cannot actually see those in the room right now, we're focused on Brett. Just ask you to speak up if any of these questions are true for you. Please raise your hand or say so. Okay, seeing none. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Please raise your hand or say so. Commissioner Ert, I see your hands raised.
I'm just going to read my disclaimer if that's okay.
Yes.
In my position as admin for an online community with 10,000 neighbors, I frequently read and am tagged in social media posts and comments related to the City of Milwaukee. Some communication may relate to issues being addressed at the Planning Commission. I do not knowingly interact or engage with current issues being addressed at the Planning Commission. Out of 60,000 comments and posts per month, I do not specifically recall any communications related to the subject matter of tonight's hearing, but make this general declaration for the record.
Thank you, Commissioner Ernst. We appreciate that. Do any members of the Planning Commission wish to report on any ex parte contacts? Please raise your hand. And again, if I could get the Planning Commission, the dais. Just seeing Commissioner Ernst right now, but assuming that nobody else is raising their hand, so we'll move on. Will any commissioners who have visited the site prior to the hearing this evening, please raise your hands? Okay, and again, the camera right now is focused on Commissioner Ernst, and I'm not sure if we can get it to return back to the room so that people at home.
Maybe we need to say something in here. Does that bring it back to our view?
Perfect. Yes, that's exactly right. All right. So once again, can you just raise your hand if you've been to the site? Okay, seeing 3 in the room raised, and maybe Kashrabadi, there is 4 in the room. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And did any of the commissioners who visited the site speak to anyone at the site or know anything that is different than is indicated in the staff report for this application? Please raise your hand or say so otherwise. Seeing no hands raised, moving on. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission? If so, use the raise your hand feature *9. We'll just give a second here for anyone who may want to do that. Brett, are you seeing any activity from attendees?
I am not.
Great. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter? Again, raise your hand or use *9. And Brett, are you seeing any activity?
No activity.
Okay, great. Well, then let's proceed to the staff report.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Let me manage a little bit. So I am Brett Kelber, Senior Planner with the city. It's good to see 4 of the commissioners in person and to meet a couple of them in person for the first time this evening, and good to see the rest of you online. I'll be walking you through this application. It's a type 3 review for a community service use sign proposed at the Milwaukee High School for an electronic reader board. So the site, most people are familiar with the high school campus in the downtown area. It's kind of highlighted in blue here. You can see kind of a large feature. This is an aerial photo from the time during the school renovation. So there are classroom units on the track. To the southeast of there, you can see a box labeled proposed sign location. That is a location near the entrance to the southwestern parking lot on the site, which is also closest to the main entry to the school. The graphic just to the right shows the zoning of the area. The school campus is primarily zoned with a moderate to high density zone designation of R2. There are a couple of parts of the campus that have an R1B business office designation or downtown mixed use, but the majority of the site is zoned for residential R2. And the school does have a de facto community service use overlay. It's been reviewed multiple times for modifications under the CSU banner. And the proposal, this is a rendering showing kind of the location of the sign near that southwest parking lot entrance with kind of a graphic of the new building behind it. It would replace the existing monument sign, which is kind of which is a static granite monument sign. In that same location would actually incorporate that existing sign, would be part of this new sign display, which would include the old sign as well as a new electronic reader board. The graphic here is showing, let's see, this is the area of the proposed sign you can see near the parking lot entrance. And the proposal is through this rendering would include the existing static granite monument sign, and right next to it, kind of on the larger monument piece, would be an electronic reader board. It does meet the size requirements or limitations for a community service use sign getting type 3 review. It's limited to overall 40 square feet for the total display, and that's what's proposed here. The granite sign, approximately 22.5 square feet, and a slightly smaller 17 square foot electronic reader board sign. It would be oriented to face Willard Street and 23rd there. And so it would be kind of a single-sided sign. Some of the limitations for community service use signs, I noted the size limitation. They're also generally limited to the illumination type that is available to the underlying zone. In this case, as I noted earlier, it's primarily residential, R2, which really allows very little to no illumination. As you all are aware, in 2021, last year, the school did propose this sign. You reviewed that case. A result was a directive from the city council to adjust the sign code to allow electronic display signs for public high schools. And so that is why the school is back with this application to kind of carry forward on that directive. And as we noted, the sign meets all of the relevant dimensional size requirements. It would be subject kind of on an ongoing basis to some of the same regulations that other electronic display signs of this this type and size would be, and I highlighted the primary one, which is there's a limitation on the rate, how often the message can change. It's once every 10 seconds. So as a type 3 CSU sign, the review considerations for the Planning Commission are some of the ones that were discussed in the staff report. That is just considering the proximity of the sign to other residences in the area. What's the classification of adjacent streets? How busy are they? And in general, what is the scale of surrounding development? And staff discussed those issues in the staff report, concluded that given the proposed location, size of the sign, and the surrounding development, that it did seem appropriate and to scale for the proposed location. So with that in mind, the recommendation from staff was to approve the sign as proposed with a specific condition just to specify that the electronic reader board portion of the sign is what's allowed to be illuminated. There's no illumination allowed for the static or granite display. That was something that was noted in the applicant's materials. They did propose that illumination, and just to be clear that that's not going to be allowed here just because of the sign code for the underlying zone. So with that, we recommend that you adopt the proposed findings and conditions of approval. And you have the standard suite of decision options to approve things as proposed with the findings and conditions in the packet. If you want to make some modifications, we'll capture those. And if you feel that there's a need for further discussion and to continue the hearing, you have the option to do that or recommend denial. We do have until May 24th to get to a final decision, which would include an appeal to the City Council. So with that, I'll ask if anyone has any questions about this before moving forward.
Brett, can you explain the message change every 10 minutes? So
10 seconds.
I guess I can, every 10 seconds. I guess I can see it one of two ways, right? If I were to look at the Blazer scoreboard, they would have advertisements and maybe somebody flying through the air and dunking a basketball and then big bright lights and stuff like that. Or I could think of it as a normal illuminated sign that just kind of scrolls a message across without a lot of electronic lights and stuff. Is that what that purpose of that 10-second rule is, or?
The purpose of the limitation on timing of change is to prevent, in general, for almost like a television style of sign where you're watching a video kind of display. So the idea is that even a scrolling message, I don't think would meet that standard of changing once every 10 seconds. The idea is that you present a message, it holds for at least 10 seconds, and then it transitions to another message. The idea being that it is, in a way, the best of both worlds. It's a static sign that's presenting a message that can be read without being distracting to traffic, that kind of thing, but it's also changing in an automated kind of way. So the 10-second rule is one that's been kind of identified as one that presents a reasonable amount of time that someone driving by or walking by might see a message without it changing too quickly and not have it be distracting like a video.
Does the light run 24? I mean, does the sign run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or does it shut off after a certain time?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. That may be a good one that the applicant team can address. I assume it has the capability to run all the time. It probably also has the capability to be controlled in a time over certain hours. But we can ask the applicant team that question. Thank you. Other questions?
Brett, I know earlier when the commission had seen this application, there was also discussion about the color of the light, and also whether the display is allowed to be multicolored. So it sounds as though those things are not included in the new code revisions. Is that the case?
I'm not as familiar with that detail. Can you say a little bit more about the coloring? I mean, of the message.
I think I'll defer to Commissioner Heemner. I believe that was your comment or question, rather, was whether or not the display is allowed to be multicolor. And then I guess maybe that it might have been just that simple. But Greg, do you recall your question?
Yeah, so I believe my comment was to make it monochrome. And when I meant monochrome, that meant two colors. So the background color and the signage or the message color. I think the 10-second rule gets to what I was trying to get to not make it a TV broadcast or something so distracting, that it starts off in a little ball and goes blast and it, makes a big deal. That was kind of the point I think I was getting to. And so I think the 10-second rule, it satisfies what my issue was.
And then the second question I had was just about the general illuminance of the display itself. How is there a requirement or restriction on how bright it can be?
Yes, the code, that section 14.24 does have, I think, a limitation on the brightness level. So both the message change rate and the illumination level are regulated in the code.
Okay, sorry if I just didn't see that. We do have a hand raised by Vice Chair Edge.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Brett. So my question is that with the approval criteria in terms of the discretionary criteria for this review, we're supposed to consider there's been sorry, let me pull up the text again. The proximity of the sign to residences, the functional classification of adjacent streets, and the scale of the surrounding development. And so I guess what I'm wondering is when it's obviously, I think it's pretty intuitive when what we're considering with proximity to residences. What is the guidance really for us with considering the functional classification of the adjacent streets? Is the intent of that we're trying to keep it on a higher classification roadway or a lower traffic, lower speed roadway so it's less distracting? Not really clear on what we're supposed to be considering there. Do you have any input on that, Brett?
Yeah, the code doesn't say specifically, doesn't give any direction about that. It just says you're to consider that. And I suppose that as I was thinking about it for the staff report analysis, I thought that it could probably go in either direction, depending on the nature of the sign and the nature of the street. And I think then Laura can or Justin can weigh in, I guess, if you have some other thoughts or perspectives. I mean, I can imagine scenarios where you have a really high classification street that has a lot of traffic, maybe has a lot of other signs, and that might be a reason to say that maybe an electronic reader board sign in a particular location would not be a good choice because it would just be adding to a lot of visual clutter that's already there. In another case, with a fairly busy street that didn't have a lot of existing signage, one might argue that it seems perfectly appropriate. It kind of fits in. People are driving by and it's an appropriate place. It wouldn't be highly distracted because it's the only sign around. And the same way with a lower classification street, I suppose that one could argue that having a sign with changing messages on a low volume street might seem really out of character with the street, depending on how it's developed, or at the same time, not a real problem because there isn't that much traffic. So I could see it kind of going either way and maybe allows the commission to assess each on a case-by-case basis, depending on how a particular street is developed. Laura, do you have other thoughts or?
I would say I think Brett has hit it on the nail on the head. I think it's really designed to allow you to take into consideration multiple factors. And I won't repeat the examples that he gave, but there are many other similar examples where you kind of need to balance the difference between that lower collector, the existing infrastructure that's there, traffic levels, and a variety of things. And of course, we encourage you to, and I couldn't see who all raised their hand, but to visit the site and take a look at it for yourself, because sometimes that can be that can illuminate no pun intended, exactly what the impact of a sign like this is going to be. So I think it's meant to provide flexibility for you to look at a variety of factors.
All right, thank you both. Appreciate that.
So if no other commissioners have questions, then I think we can move on to the applicant.
Okay, I'm going to promote some of the folks in the attendees list. I'll do the ones that I know for sure. And then as they arrive, they can tell me if there are other people that need to be allowed in.
Before we have their testimony, staff, can you tell me whether or not we've received any correspondence on the matter other than those items that were received in the packet?
We did. We received one email that I attempted to forward to the planning commissioners via email at about 4:45 today. It came in about 4:15. It was from, hold on, let me get it in front of me. Mary Ellen Bowles, who indicated she's a neighbor living close to where the signs, she said sign, but it's one single sign would be, and she expressed some opposition to the reader board, arguing that there's already a lot of light pollution impacts in the downtown area, and she listed several examples. So that is the only comment that we've received outside of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Applicants, would you please state your name and city of residence for the record before speaking?
Sure. So I am going to actually give a presentation on behalf of the district. My name is Mercedes Sarah, and my residence is in Milwaukee, Oregon. And I'm just going to share my screen, if that's all right.
Sure.
I'll do my best to not be too repetitive with what Brett gave this evening in his presentation. So good evening. As I said, my name is Mercedes Sarah. I'm a senior planner with 3J Consulting, representing North Clackamas School District. With me tonight are representatives from North Clackamas School District and Brick Architecture. We'd like to thank the Planning Commission for their time this evening, and we'd like to thank staff for their staff report and presentation. The North Clackamas School District is proposing a Type 3 sign review to allow for the placement of that electronic reader board sign at Milwaukee High School. As staff explained, the proposed sign will be located at the location at the intersection of Southeast 23rd and Southeast Willard Street. It is an intersection that's most heavily traveled by students, parents, and teachers, so it's an ideal location for this sign. Electronic reader board signs are used at high schools throughout the North Clackamas School District, including both Rex Putnam and North Clackamas High School, and they are great to allow, they are used to allow information to be provided quickly, efficiently, and accurately to the student body, using multiple languages and addressing multiple programs that are going on in the school. As Brett stated, the applicant previously requested approval of a reader board sign at the same location before a recent code amendment to the Milwaukee Code related to electronic reader board signs at high school locations was passed. The former request was brought before you through the variance criteria rather than through the sign permit criteria. The commission found that the request could not meet the applicable variance criteria and issued a denial. This current request is not requesting a variance, as the relevant code was added to the Milwaukee Municipal Code, and that proposal can be evaluated against the code. As Brett stated, the sign, it does meet the all minimum size requirements. The illumination area is approximately 17 square feet, and the total sign is approximately 39.4 square feet. The applicable criteria and criteria 2 and 3 are similar in that they are technical requirements. You asked about the illumination intensity. That's 0.3 foot candles over ambient light, and the sign will meet that lighting requirement. It will also have a mechanism to adjust the illumination levels depending on ambient light, as it is only as bright as it needs to be. And the transition time between messages will be no less than, sorry, it says 2 seconds long, but 10 seconds long, as indicated by the code. That covers the criteria within the code. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. I know there were a few questions that came up during staff time that we are prepared to answer if there are additional questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mercedes. Since I cannot see the commissioners in the room, could someone just speak up so we can see all of you?
Yes.
Thank you. And if we could get the camera to focus on the dais so I can see all commissioners, that would be great. Commissioner Kashrabadi, let's see, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just curious to know how long would the sign be on for? Would it turn off at a certain point? I didn't see that in the.
Sure. So we haven't dictated a time that it would specifically be on and off, but it is able to be programmed to be turned off. So we don't have specific timing. We could suggest likely that we would prefer it to be on at least from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That would be our preferred timing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other commissioners, I see Commissioner Hamer.
So before, when this came before us, there was an idea of connecting it to a backup generator and use it as part of communication during an emergency. Is that still the game plan for the site?
Yes.
Curious if the applicant could share more information about kind of the ambient lighting control and how bright the sign might be during the evening hours.
I guess I'm not an expert on ambient lighting. I know that it will adjust so that it will not exceed that 0.3 foot candle requirement, dependent on the ambient light. I don't really know more about the mechanism than that. I don't know if our team from BRIC might know a little bit more.
Or maybe just to put a finer point on my question. So I could imagine that the sign would be brighter during daylight hours in order to compete with the sun. But as the sun goes down and that the ambient lighting, the brightness of the sign itself would also kind of dim until it maybe stopped operating or not. Is that a correct understanding?
I believe that's the intent of the ambient controls. Yes.
And I have a follow-up question. This is Chair Lowe's fault. So in the submittal, I see that it's 3,000 K. Is that, I guess I'm still hung up on kind of understanding how what the application has relates back to the code and how I can just check to see that the illumination is not more than the 0.3. Is there some kind of calculation or even a photometrics that would demonstrate that compliance with code? Or are we kind of taking your word for it at this point?
Travis, do you have an answer for this one?
Yeah, I can.
Travis, if you could just say your name and then city of residence, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm Travis Nissen. I'm with BRIC Architects, and then city of residence is Portland, Oregon. And then just to, I think for color wise, I know there's two options. One is a full color display, which is, kind of what you see at a auto shop or, car dealer. And then I think what we were looking at is, you saw it in one of Mercedes' first photos, was the tricolor display where it's red, yellow, or green. And I think we were
Sorry, hey Travis, sorry, we're having a hard time hearing you. Can you get closer to a microphone or?
Yeah, of course, I can speak louder too. So I think there's two options. One is a full color display, and the other is a tricolor display where the LED components are limited to one or three colors. And so we were looking more at that option, which is what you saw in the two other reader boards at Rex, Putnam, and then I think I'm not sure which other school, but it's that option. And then there's also, so we haven't fully spec'd it out, but the LED would be measured off of the distance from the road, and then there would be a sensor in the reader board that would gauge, or like a photometric sensor. But I don't have any specific information at this point, but it would all be anecdotal, but we can follow up with that.
City staff, I would just, typically we have photometrics. Is that not a requirement of the application in any way to confirm compliance with that specific code metric?
Yeah, fair question. I think that we often get photometrics for area lighting, like for a parking lot. Sorry, let me swing this over. These are the illumination standards in the code are also kind of performance based as well, and so it's something that I guess we don't always get that information as part of the application, but I think the code is written, with my understanding, the code is written to kind of respond to the performance of signs out there, and the applicants understand that with their approval, they're required to meet those standards, and that we respond if there are complaints or a concern that the sign is not performing to the level that it's supposed to be.
Okay. And then I have just another question for the applicant, if you wouldn't mind. Mercedes or Travis, was there a consideration? I know that we're amending an existing sign and adding to this additional illuminated sign. Was there any consideration for aligning the angle of this sign more appropriately with that portion of Willard that kinks to meet Lark at a 90 versus being completely parallel with Willard at kind of the bus lane and the south facing entry of the school or elevation of the school? And the reason I ask is because the residents that are, approximate just directly across the street there, any way that sign can be tilted in more a southwest direction will reduce that kind of nighttime illumination or distraction to the residents that I'm concerned we might be hearing some of that in the feedback we're getting from public. So was there any consideration for angling that sign any more in a southwestern direction?
That's a great question. We did study that fairly extensively. We looked at it, so it was angled right like perpendicular to Willard. So when you approached, it would be really visible. And I think where we ended up was that we wanted it parallel so that it would be visible from both directions. But we obviously understand the feedback from the neighbors. So if that was a comment, I think we would be. I don't want to speak for the team, but we could adjust that to be parallel to Willard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do think as you're approaching from Willard, say you're coming from the east, driving west, it'd be difficult to see a parallel. I mean, you'd have to be like basically in front of it in order to see. But okay, I appreciate that feedback. Again, if someone at the dais can just speak up so we can see your video.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners who have comment or question and want to raise their hand and ask our applicant? So I'm seeing no hands raised. So Mercedes and Travis, appreciate the presentation tonight and your feedback on our questions. We'll continue then with the script here. Let's see. So we'll go for.
Chair Losbell, I have a clarifying question for staff, maybe before we get into testimony. Is that fine?
Yeah. Yep.
Brett, I was just curious with the reference to being able to see the sign from the back. So the sign standard is a maximum of 40 square feet per display surface. So side A, 40 feet, side B, 40 feet. Is that? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Thank you. Other testimony in support of the application. Do we have anyone in the audience tonight who would like to speak in support of the application? If so, please use the raise your hand function or *9. And Brett, I actually don't know if we have anybody in the room, but if we do, I'm sure you'll let me know.
Right. We don't have anyone physically in the room from the public. We just have a couple of people in the attendee group. I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay. Just a couple seconds. Okay, I'm going to move on then. And if we have anybody who wishes to speak in opposition of the application, please use the raise your hand function or *9 to be recognized by staff.
Again, seeing no hands.
Okay. And last question here is whether or not we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak with neutral testimony. Please make yourself known using the raise your hand function.
There are no indications, Chair.
Okay. All right. Then we're going to fly right past rebuttal. And we will go into closing of the public hearing. The public testimony portion of this hearing, CSU-2021-005 for 2301 Southeast Willard Street, is now closed. This is an opportunity then for the commission to discuss. Is there anyone who would like to lead discussion?
I'd be happy to open and just say, I don't think I have very many questions about this, and I'm ready to move forward with the vote myself.
I can certainly support this proposal as well.
Okay. Vice Chair Edge, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've looked over, thoroughly read the findings and conditions of approval and feel that they reflect the facts on the record. I'd be happy to support this tonight.
Great. I'll just add my 2 comments here. I would like to see the sign angled so that it is more parallel to that 90-degree angle as Willard meets Lark. And again, just in response to public testimony that Brett had read off in regards to the residents, I think that would be a good move, a good neighbor move. So that would be angling the sign position itself. So it's not directly due south, but 45 degrees more southwest. And I am also interested, and it is kind of standard practice that we see photometrics for these types of signs. So these types of signs can be a significant nuisance to residents, and we have a large residential population across the street. I would like to have the confidence knowing that the sign illumination is designed to meet code and does meet code with photometrics. So I would like to make that request. And those would be my 2 comments.
Chair Roosevelt, are you suggesting that we continue the hearing until we get the photometrics?
That would be the request.
Would you be satisfied with a condition of approval where they have to provide that information to staff before they get the building permits or whatever other permits they need from the city?
I would be assuming that if once it was read, if it didn't meet criteria, that city staff would then I would like to know what then would be the case. And Brett, maybe you could speak to that process.
Yeah, I think that a next step for the applicant to move forward, if they got approval, would be to submit the plans for a sign permit, and we would conduct a review to make sure that the sign was consistent with whatever conditions are imposed with this decision, and that the other conditions, the other requirements of the sign code that are applicable are met. So we would look for that information. And I guess in the case of, there are a couple things. One is the kind of the automatic adjusting of the sign brightness, as Commissioner Sherman was talking about. So I guess we'd be looking to confirm that it has that capability. And then in terms of the brightness, I mean, I imagine that it's possible that the sign would have quite a greater capability of illumination level than the code allows. And so I think the thing for us to sort out or figure out would be just to be very clear about, you know, the sign using its own internal regulations to limit its capacity. Because I would imagine that these signs are built, you know, and would exist in a number of different jurisdictions that might have slightly different rules. And so I guess they have the ability to hit different illumination levels. And so we would work with the applicant to make sure that the appropriate limits are set to meet our code standards.
Right. And just in my experience, it's the maximum output is what is shown on the photometrics, so that if for some reason the maximum output was if the programming for the sign was adjusted to the maximum output, we would understand that the maximum met code, rather than assuming it could be reduced down to meet. So that, yeah, that's what I'd be looking for in a photometric. Okay, those are two conditions that I would put on conditions of approval.
So before we make a motion with a condition of approval that actually exists by signed permit planning department, I want to make sure that this photo, right, the amount of illumination or the amount of light that it puts out, the photometric, is a requirement by the city that will be checked off in a box when the application is put in. Correct? So there is no reason to put a condition on it?
But, and I think what we're talking about to some degree is a performance standard or requirement of the signage.
Isn't that required by your sign checklist?
Yeah, and I also again, I think it's similar to, I mean, there are several illumination performance standards that are in the code about, you know, how many foot candles above ambient light, which is changing throughout the day, obviously. Those are things that feel to me like performance standards. And I guess maybe Justin can weigh in. If what you're getting at, Commissioner Hemer, is that there are standards or requirements in the code that the sign is supposed to meet or be held to. Some of those are, because it might have a greater capacity that our code allows, are ones that will be performance-based. And so some of them may be difficult to check at the permit time because the sign might have a certain capacity. We can explore more whether there are ways for the sign to kind of internally regulate itself to meet those standards. Some of them are going to be, since they're related to ambient light, will be changing throughout the day. So yeah.
Right, and so the answer is that you have a check and balance system that if it is annoying a neighbor and they go out there with a photo meter, right? And says, hey, this is too bright, then that would be a code-driven complaint, and then code compliance would go out there. Well, what I'm worried about is putting on a condition for a price of a sign that is available on the open market, and then we put on a condition on it that then limits it to not being able to even get a sign because it may or may not exist in the open market.
I'm not sure I fully understand you. I thought what you were going with there was whether or not the permit check sheet would say they need to produce a photometric map, which would confirm compliance with code, and whether or not that was already on their checklist. I understand it's part of code language, but how do they confirm? is it part of your checklist requirements for receiving a permit that someone produce photometric map?
Well, again, I think that this is something that is more common with respect to, for example, parking lot lighting, where there are requirements or limitations on what foot candle amount can be present at a property line, or ensuring that there's not more than a certain level of trespass across a property line, or just a minimum level of illumination in a parking area, for example. The standards here for these electronic reader board signs are, I'll quickly summarize them. It says, may not have an illumination intensity of more than 0.3 foot candles over ambient light, measured at the distance specified by a certain calculation. And so that by its nature is a dynamic standard. It's one that I don't know that you can demonstrate photometrically very easily, because the light conditions are changing throughout the day. And I would imagine that the sign manufacturer would represent its capacity to cover a certain range of illuminations. It's difficult to check that, or if not impossible to check that at the sign permit time, because what the code is requiring is that you don't exceed a certain amount of foot candles beyond ambient light. And there's no objective, single standard of ambient light. When it's nighttime, the sign can't be greater than 0.3 foot candles brighter. When it's daytime, it can't be greater than 0.3 foot candles brighter. But the light level is changing throughout the day. So that's what I'm saying, is that's a standard that is not possible really to check at the sign permit review time. It's more of a performance standard. Brett?
It's interesting that we have code language that we don't know how to confirm, or we cannot confirm.
Well, if there was a concern or a question about the illumination, I see what you're getting at. It does seem like it's something that's more a standard that would have to be checked in the field in a way, and in response to a particular level of light. Or I guess I'd be looking for specifications for the sign that says it has the capability to regulate itself and produce an output of no more than 0.3 foot candles.
Chair Losfeld, if I may, one of the things that I feel like I'm hearing some concern about, I think is also kind of addressed in code. So looking at 14.24.020 sub G, sub 1, sub C, it talks about signs shall not be brighter than necessary for clear and adequate visibility. Upon notice by the planning director that a sign is out of compliance with these standards, some of which were just a little bit qualitative, the owner or operator of an electronic sign shall immediately adjust the illumination of the sign. So I do think we have a backstop there that, I think as Brett and others were saying, we probably need to have the sign installed, have it trued up to kind of real life conditions. And then, if things were too bright, it certainly seems within the city's capabilities to talk with the applicant who's hearing this discussion and make some of those adjustments to fine tune it.
So Chair, I guess to follow on that, I suppose maybe the clearer thing to say is at plan check time, what we'd be looking for is that the sign has the capacity to limit itself to certain levels of light above ambient light. We'd be looking for that feature. In addition to the specific 0.3 foot candles over ambient light standard, there's another requirement that just says that the sign needs to have a mechanism that automatically adjusts to the illumination level to comply with that standard. So I think what we'd be looking for at plan check time is that the sign has the ability to do that and can be programmed to do that. And then from that point forward, we'd be responding if there were concerns that it was not meeting that standard. And at that point, we'd get a light meter or find someone who could, or we'd ask the applicant to show us photometrics or do some kind of actual test and bring the sign back into compliance with the standard. So I think we'd be looking for its capacity to regulate itself.
Okay. That bit there is helpful. Thanks, Brett. Go ahead.
Can you go back to your 45-degree angle on Willard Street? And is I guess I'm going to ask staff if that is explicit enough of an understanding to understand exactly where that sign, how it should be placed.
Right, so the sign currently parallels Willard at the bus pull-in, and I'm suggesting angling at 45 degrees in the southwest direction.
So
towards southwest.
let's assume that I barely know my left from right, so I don't know how north, south, east, west works. I am assuming that you are talking, turning it more towards the parking lot.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I do a quick screen share and see if I can illustrate this with one of the slides? So this was a view of, sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll stay here. So this is the current location. This is where you're saying it's currently oriented to be more or less parallel to Willard Street. And your suggestion is to rotate it, I guess I'd say maybe bringing the right end clockwise 45 degrees or so that it's more oriented to be facing towards Lake Road and kind of facing in the direction of
Correct.
3rd.
Correct. So it would be more parallel the inlet to the parking, which is off at a 45-degree angle off of that road. So correct.
Okay.
One thing about that kind of consideration that might not, I feel like we heard with mentioned in the presentation, but might not have been as clear in the packet, was that it sounds like the applicant is expecting this to be double-sided. And so by doing that rotation, high schoolers walking out of the building wouldn't get to see it from one side, because the other side would be kind of shining back towards the building in a slightly awkward fashion. It seems like it really is maximized to get visibility from both the south and the north side for students and families coming into the parking lot, as well as people coming out of the parking lot. By doing a rotation like that, we'd be losing some of that functionality.
I actually disagree with that, because if you look at the site plan that's provided, folks are coming at a 45-degree angle out of that entry on the west face of the building. So there's a pathway that you'd be basically, the sign with this repositioning would be at a perpendicular angle to the path of travel out of the building on the west face. So I actually think it would be improved.
Chair, this is Commissioner Massey. Let me ask sort of a general question. I thought I heard from the applicant during their presentation that they gave this orientation of sign a considerable discussion about how to orient it. And they chose this based upon, I think, what Commissioner Sherman was talking about, is to maximize the visibility, which is the function of the sign. So I understand your concerns. I'm a little bit concerned about us, changing angles of signs here in this meeting. Because you may be right, but we don't know that.
I did also hear the applicant say that they would be happy to consider that.
There was certainly a lot I didn't hear during that discussion, but I thought I heard that there was considerable thought about how to orient the sign. So I may have missed something. Yeah.
Vice Chair Edge.
Thank you, Chair. So I was just curious if this would be one of those classic opportunities to take a 5-minute recess and let staff have a conversation with the applicant about prospective conditions. Do we want to attempt that and give staff an opportunity to check in with the applicant team about how receptive they would be to a condition, so that we can, ideally what we want to do is make sure that we term the condition appropriately, so that we get so that we're minimizing the impacts and and working with them to make sure that we're still maximizing the visibility that they're looking for. And so, given that there's kind of a balancing act there, this might be a good opportunity for staff to have a conversation behind the scenes and come back to us.
Yeah, I'd be happy to entertain that suggestion. Brett, would you agree?
Sure, we can, I'm not sure technically how we'll do that, but we can try to figure out how to, if you're saying like kind of take a recess and let us try to talk to the applicant. Sure.
Yeah, so I would suggest that we reconvene then at 7:51.
Can I ask for an extra 5 minutes because we have to figure this out technically and we.
Yeah,
Just bring the applicant.
I was just going to say 5 minutes isn't enough to do that with this the technological hurdles. So I think at a minimum, we want 10 minutes to try to figure it out, get in touch, and then come back on. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, Commissioner Kashrabadi, I see your hand is raised.
Never mind.
Never mind. Okay. All right. So 7:56.
Sure. Make a motion to take a recess until 7:56.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's take a recess till 7:56.
that you're ready to travel this summer, Adam, but I just got an email earlier today about cheap flights.
We're waiting on
Somebody's
Commissioner
gonna-
Massey.
We're actually expecting it first.
Oh, congratulations.
Justin, do you have your hand raised to say something when we go live?
Accidental hand raise.
I just thought you were being so patient.
That's twice tonight I've done that. Must be in my normal trackpad movement.
All right, I think we're all back in the room now.
Brett, I just have one other thing to add. During our break, I went on Google Earth, and I understand this is an existing sign. Is it an existing sign intended to be used in its existing location? If so, at least from Google Earth, it appears to parallel I'm sorry, I'll be more specific. It appears to have that 45-degree angle today from Willard, and more in line with what I'm requesting. And so I'm asking for some clarification there. Is the sign intended to be shown as it is in the site plan?
I think our suggestion is that you invite Cindy, at least Cindy and Mercedes, back into the panel from the applicant team to address some of your questions and explain just a little bit more about the sign. They could confirm what I think. I think you're correct that the existing monument sign is more at an angle there right now, and it will be used, as I understand it, as part of the new sign, but they're going to pull it up and they're going to reorient it to be in line with what's shown on the site plan, because it's going to be added to the structure that includes a reader board. So they're not just tacking a reader board on to the end of it the way that it is right now. It's going to be reoriented. So I'll pull a couple people in from the applicant team, and we'll suggest that you maybe ask them some clarifying questions.
Okay.
Do we have to reopen the record then?
I think so. Laura, can you confirm?
Yes, that is correct.
Is there a portion of the script you'd like me to read to make sure that that's done correctly?
Justin?
Just state for the record that we're going to reopen the public record to take some further discussion with the applicant.
Okay. For the record, we are reopening the public hearing for CSU-2021-005 to discuss a couple clarifying questions with the applicant. Applicant, please state your name and city of residence.
Mercedes Sarah, Milwaukee, Oregon. So to answer your first question, Chair, yes, the sign will be reused, but it is being reused at a new angle as part of a new sign. So a couple of things came up in the discussion that I just want to address. The first one, the sign is actually designed to be one-sided. It will not be two-sided. So it will only angle towards the street and be illuminated on that side. And the angle was chosen to maximize the visibility of the student body walking along Willard. Many of the students actually exit the building and walk along Willard or take the bus and do not come in and out of that parking lot. So the rotation would capture those entering the visitor parking lot if we rotated, but not those on Willard walking and driving. Regarding the housing across the street, the offices of the Northwest Housing Authority complex are actually located directly across the street rather than residences. That main building there is the offices building for the complex. so it wouldn't be shining directly into the residences. And then rather than changing the rotation, if the district could make a suggestion that the sign be shut off at 10 p.m. To reduce impacts on the neighborhood, that would be preferred over the rotation.
Mercedes, are you saying that the multi-story, the entire, that entire building across the street is all offices? Because it's, I don't know, 3 stories, if my memory serves me correct.
Right. So my information comes from the Northwest Housing Authority's website, which shows the site plan for that complex and labels that building as the offices. I'm not sure whether or not there would be residences on the highest levels.
Okay.
Chair, this is Commissioner Massey. If I could add something here to clarify, I've actually taken a tour of the facility when it first opened. And the reason that there's so many offices there, it's not just the offices for that one location. It's the offices for the entire region in the Pacific Northwest where they have these kind of facilities. So it's a regional headquarters, not just a administrative office for that one location. I was surprised by that as well.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? No. Okay. Thank you, Mercedes. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think we can close the public testimony for CSU-2021-005. And if someone in City Hall can say something. Okay.
No.
All right. So I like the idea that we prescribe or that we add to the conditions of approval the hours of operation, stating that after 10 p.m. the sign should be shut off.
I would like to add to the caveat, unless if it is being used for an emergency situation.
Thank you. I agree.
That's a good point.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve application CSU 20.
Sorry, we do have a hand raised. Just let me get to Vice Chair Edge really quick, but I want you to save that energy.
Nope, I was going to make the motion, so Greg can go ahead with the motion and I'll second it.
Oh.
I would like to make a motion to approve application CSU 2021-005 and adapt the recommending findings and conditions of approval found in attachments 1 and 2 with the addition of the sign not being illuminated after 10 p.m. unless in an emergency situation.
Second.
I have a second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm seeing all hands raised. All those opposed say nay. All right, it's been moved, seconded, and approved by the Planning Commission. Let's see here. We should move on then for any discussion items by the commission.
The appeal rights.
Appeal rights. Let's see. I apologize. You're right. If anyone wishes to appeal to the decision of the City Council, you can complete an application stating the grounds for your appeal within 15 days of mailing or notice of decision. Please see planning staff for details. Thank you, Vice Chair Edge. Skipped forward to other business a little too quickly there. And then let's see here. We've got Housing Capacity Technical Committee. Laura, is this under other business?
No, I'm sorry. It shouldn't be there. We already discussed that.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So then the question is to commissioner staff, whether you have other business that you would like to discuss.
We do not.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have other business? Oh, Commissioner Heemer, go ahead.
Sure Brett changed the camera angle on me. So I just want to say a couple of things. One, unfortunately, it is rare when we put a condition on contacting a historical society for items inside a building. But I want to give a big shout out to Polish, who's doing the building at Kellogg Bowl. They have contacted the Milwaukee Historical Society and are allowing us to get into the building. So a big shout out for that. And I think Commissioner or Vice Chair Edge is going to have to help me on this. But on March 12th, March 19th, there is OGLC is doing another program, and this is about race and exclusion laws in Oregon. You can sign up on their website. If you do not know the story, it is absolutely fascinating how Oregon excluded people and how they wrote their laws to exclude them. So it is via Zoom. I think it starts at noon.
Yeah, it'll be at noon on this Saturday, March 12th, and you can register for a link at oaklodgegovernanceproject.org.
And Commissioner Edge, or Vice Chair Edge, if you could please pass a note along to OGLC. They have been putting together some wonderful programs and inviting everybody in the public to them. And so a big appreciation for what they're doing.
I'll be glad to relay that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Hehner. I would just like to say Happy International Women's Day to the other ladies in the room. March 8th is an important day that marks, it would indicate the day of which, if working in parallel with their male counterparts, women would have to work in a year, an additional time frame up to March 8th. In order to receive equal pay for that 1 year worked by their male counterpart. So that's why we look at March 8th on the calendar. And I'd just like to say Happy International Women's Day to those out there listening. I think that's then it. So we can look for the forecast of future meetings from Laura.
All right, great. We've got 2 items on March 22nd, subdivision replat and a setback variance. And then on April 12th, we've got the Senate Bill 458 code amendments that we had the work session on last time. And then we will have another variance request that evening as well.
Great. Thank you, Laura. I will I will entertain rather a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.